So coming down into the cave here, we have all the rock around us down here, which makes sense because we are underground. The rock that is here is limestone rock for the most part. And this is part of the reason why we see a cave here today. Our limestone along with water, those two things are really going to help shape and create the cave that we see today from the passageways that we will walk through to the formations that we will see. And this is because our limestone rock is actually a lot like our teeth. It can get cavities in it. And what is going to cause cavities to form here in our limestone over time is actually our water. So that water has been moving into cracks and holes in the rock. Slowly over time, that takes those cracks and starts dissolving away the rock that's there and starts making those cracks just a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. So slowly over time then some of these cracks can be turning into passageways down here through the ground. This is especially happening where our river likes to flow underground. That's really good at creating our cave passageways. Rainwater can be doing the same thing, but not necessarily creating our cave passageways. That might be making a lot of sinkholes at the surface, however. So we get lots of sinkholes forming at the surface here in this area. In the land of 10,000 lakes here, there are actually no natural lakes, but we do have 10,000 sinkholes here in Fillmore County. So lots and lots of sinkholes that like to form here. So yeah, now today on this level of the cave, the river doesn't flow up here unless we're seeing these flooding events happening. But that water's up here for such a short period of time, it really doesn't get to do anything in terms of making these passageways any larger. So this level of the cave is essentially done growing. It really won't be getting any bigger. But we do still have activity happening on this level of the cave. We actually have formations that like to grow and form in this area now that these are nice air-filled passageways. The cave isn't done growing though, even though it's done growing on this level in terms of its passageways. There is more passageways continuing to grow and form today in those lower levels where the river continues to flow. But this is a slow process. This isn't something that happens overnight, so we probably won't be seeing much of a change over our lifetime here. Mystery Cave actually we think is anywhere between 500,000 and 1 million years old. So it takes a long time for our cave to actually grow and to develop into what we see today. Now, as I said earlier, we do have formations that are growing and forming on this level of the cave. So today that's what we're going to be exploring as we go through the cave. All these formations that like to grow down here. Now, as we start heading into the cave to explore these formations, we do want to make sure that we are watching our step on our metal bridges that we will walk over. I highly recommend using the handrails as you walk over these. There's also going to be a little bit of dripping water up here on the right-hand side. Not quite the shower that it was the other day after we had all the rain, but there's still quite a bit of water that likes to drip in there. So if you don't want to be dripped on, this is one spot I can have you avoid that dripping water. You can move over to that handrail on the left when you get to it, and you won't be dripped on in that spot. Why don't we start heading this way? This is going to start sloping down as well. So just, again, make sure you watch your step and use the handrail.
Did you just hit your head?
On the wall, those of you towards the back are having difficulty seeing our formation here, feel free to move in up onto this upper level there. So here on the wall, this is a very common formation. We're going to be seeing a lot of this today throughout Mystery Cave. It's a formation called flowstone, and it gets created by the rainwater that likes to flow into this level of the cave today that's flowing over our wall. So flowing water is what makes flowstone, and our rainwater that's coming into the cave today, it's like our river water. It too can be dissolving away our limestone rock. Oftentimes this is going to be happening right at the surface though, and it's going to be making things like sinkholes up at the surface. As this water continues to move further into the ground though, and starting to get into places like our cave, oftentimes our water isn't able to dissolve any more rock away by the time it actually gets down here. So it's a little like adding sugar. You don't see it anymore, but it's still there. If you were to taste the water, you'd be able to taste the sugar. And if you keep on adding sugar to water, after a while the sugar stops dissolving. That water is only able to hold on to so much sugar. Well, the same thing here is actually happening with our limestone in our water. This water dissolves away our limestone. It's not really just disappearing, it's just ending up in our water, and our water is only able to hold on to so much of that rock. So by the time this actually drips and flows into the cave, it's carrying and holding on to all the rock it can actually hold on to. So it won't dissolve anything away. And what it actually wants to do as this comes into the cave is leave this rock behind. So as the water is flowing over the walls down here, it starts leaving that rock behind. And over time, that slowly builds up then, where our water drips or flows, and creates the formations that we see. And in particular, where that water likes to flow over our walls or our floors, it's going to make our flow stone like this here on our wall. Now, looking at a lot of our formations down here, you might be tempted to touch them. I certainly am. These look kind of really interesting. I do have one exception to the no touching rule, and that is right up here on the trail. We actually have a piece of flowstone here on the trail that we let you touch. So if you want to find out what the stuff here on the walls feels like, this will be your chance here as you head down the trail.
It's like, yeah, almost like plastic. Someone had to climb in there to put those lights in there too. Well, I'm just gonna scoot past you so the light keeps on.
So down here in Mystery Cave, as I said earlier, there's lots of flowstone down here. It's really all over the walls. So a very common formation. You guys had a chance to touch that flowstone as well. And looking at the flowstone here on our walls, I always think this looks so much like mud or clay on our walls. It looks like it would be soft. It's not. It's going to be hard, just like the piece that you guys got to touch. So That does kind of make sense because it is rock getting left behind that builds up our flowstone here over time. And so this is in fact hard like rock, just like that piece that you were getting to feel. The other thing that you might have noticed with that piece of flowstone that you were getting to feel was that it's a very almost polished type feel to it. We actually haven't purposely polished that, and flowstone isn't actually naturally that smooth and polished. So many people have touched that over time, it's actually essentially polished it. So flowstone usually is not quite that smooth, it usually is just a little bit grittier than what you were getting to feel. But still pretty smooth overall still. The other thing you might have noticed is that piece was quite bumpy. We really can get all sorts of different shapes in our flowstone because water is flowing all over the walls down here, but it doesn't always like to flow evenly over our walls. Sometimes it likes to take different trails, and so you can get different shapes in our flowstone over time. Sometimes we actually get what we like to call draperies in our flowstone, and that's what we're seeing right here on the wall. These are a very common type of flowstone that we see down here. The other thing we get are oftentimes what we like to call ribbons. So our ribbons are oftentimes going to be more on the underside of the rock, where it sticks out like this here. Now our ribbons and our draperies can also have a little more of a striped appearance to them, or it might look a little bit like something we might eat, like bacon. And if that's the case, we like to call it cave bacon. So we do have a little cave bacon down here. Keep an eye out for it. I don't have a good example here in this room for you to look at, but there is some in the cave. So as we explore the cave today, make sure you're looking around, seeing if you can find that cave bacon. Now so far I've only talked about our flowstone down here, getting created by our flowing water, but we also have lots of dripping water down here too. And so our dripping water actually makes different formations that we like to call dripstones, which are like these ones right up here on the ceiling. So you guys are probably actually more familiar with our dripstones by some other names. And those things are stalactites and stalagmites. So up on the ceiling here, these are stalactites. I always like to remember that these hold on tight to the ceiling. So these are our stalactites. And then our stalagmites, you might trip over them. So they're going to grow on the ground. There's also a gene stalagmite, so I think gene stalagmites for ground, although they can even be up on our walls, really anywhere where that dripping water hits. And then with our stalactites, there's a sea and stalactite, so sea and stalactite for ceiling. So a couple different ways to try to remember which ones are which. Over time, our stalactites and stalagmites, since they both form from our dripping water, they might be growing right above and below each other, and they might connect over time like this one has here. Or this one here. When these connect like this, we like to call these columns. So these are some columns that are down here. You guys have any questions at all so far? Well, I have a question for you. What do you think is old? Oftentimes when we think age and things being old, we're thinking within our own lifespan. And so, 100 years seems like it's really old. So that's kind of the upper end of our lifespan sometimes. So, down here in our cave, that's actually quite young. Mystery Cave has taken a long time to actually grow and get to how we see it today. As I mentioned earlier, this is really anywhere between 500,000 years old and 1,000,000 years old. So, this side of the cave is probably closer to that younger age, that 500,000 year age range. And the formations that we have down here are actually significantly younger than the rest of the cave. Because first, these passageways have to grow, and it takes time for these to actually grow and get to the size that we see them at today. And then the water actually has to leave this level, that river water, and it has to be developing passageways further down for this to become air-filled. And so it does take time before these can actually start growing. But our formations are still quite old if we think of our own, time scale here. These are probably thousands of years old down here in the cave. The older formations on this side that we found are between 11 and 13,000 years old. So many of the formations that we see take thousands of years to actually get to the size that we see them at today. And there has been a determination on like an average growth rate of a stalactite across the world. That's about 1 inch every 100 years. So it's slow growth, And your growth rate can really vary depending on where you are, because it's our water that brings in the rock to build these formations. When you have more water coming in, there's more rock coming in, so formations will grow faster. When there isn't as much water coming in, there's not as much rock coming in, and so formations are going to grow slower. So there's one stalactite up here that likes to drip a little more frequently than some others. So maybe this one's growing close to that 1 inch every 100 years. But looking at many of these other stalactites, these don't drip very frequently. So these I bet are growing even slower than that 1 inch every 100 years. So very, very slow growth down here. Okay. Well, we're at a little bit of a dead end, and so I want to give you guys just a minute or two to look around and do a little exploring on your own. And then we're actually going to be heading into another section of cave. So if you would like, there's some stairs you can go down here, see what's down here. There's a little tunnel you can go through as well. And it's just going to just loop you around and pop you out right over there. So you can meet me right back up here. Stay here.
Yep, it's dripping under here. Oh, yep, still getting me. I think you can hear the water running.
You can.
Oh, okay. I was like, am I imagining that?
No. The river is down that way. You hear it a little more now because the river is a little bit higher. Sometimes it's just a little trickly noise. That's the water down the river.
How far down is it from where we're at?
You know, I haven't been down there to actually find out. But I don't think it's all that far from us.
Yeah, I was going to say, it
Probably,
doesn't sound very far.
Within like 20 to 40 feet, probably. It's just probably out of sight.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it looks like everyone's had a chance to do a little exploring and look around, and now that you've had a chance to do that, and now that we've learned about some of the more common formations that we see down here in the tree cave, our Forestville and our dripstone. As we go to head to a new area of the cave, I'll look around, see what you can spot and find, see if you can remember the names of some of those formations as we go to head to our next spot. I am going to turn off just a couple lights here on the wall, so a little dimmer. And then we're going to be heading back this direction. We do get to do a little backtracking down here. We got a couple of dead ends over there. bridges back then, it wasn't the greatest. Like when we got the cave over in the other side of our other entrance, there was like creosote soaked wood in there, so we removed that and built a different structure there for a bridge. So they were always using the greatest material stuff. But you know, they did what they had, and maybe it would work. Wood down here, the cave can rot really quickly. Okay, so just up ahead here, our passageway that we will head into is going to be getting a little bit shorter than what we've been walking through so far today, to the point where some of us are going to have to watch our heads and duck. And for reference, those that are taller than me are going to be who needs to duck, and I'm 5'6", so 5'6" and taller. Make sure you watch your head and duck here at the bottom of the ramp as we're entering our passageway here.
Go ahead, I want to watch your head. I know, that's right. Well, I'm 5'4", so I shouldn't have to worry about it.
Right here, this is where you're going to need to watch your head.
She walked right under. Oh, plenty of.
If you missed it, teespring is up here on the right-hand side in this little passageway that has the lights in it and on the ceiling. Oh yeah, you can find it if you missed it.
Is that the cave bacon?
Yeah. Hanging right there.
Yep, that's what it looks like. Cave bacon.
Sure I got that.
Yeah, take another one.
I can't believe you're turning out the day so.
I'm surprised, yeah, it's remarkably good.
There.
Yeah.
I usually delete most of them when I get.
Oh, no, yeah. You just do it
But you never
because
know.
you feel like, you know, somebody might want to look at it, and then the next time you're bored, you're going through them and you get rid of all but like one, if you keep that one. Yeah, go down there. I'll turn the light on for you after you're down there. Trust me.
Coming here to this section of the cave, it's a very wet section of cave. There is a lot of water that likes to flow within here. And it is like this year round. Even in the winter time, when a lot of the other areas of our cave kind of dry up a bit because our ground is freezing. So if there is any rain, it doesn't get down here. And well, we normally don't get rain in the winter, although we do see a little rain here and there more recently. It just isn't able to get down here. The water that likes to come in here, we actually think might be a little bit of groundwater. We've done a little testing with our river because that was originally what we were thinking was coming in here, was maybe some of the river water. But it's not our river water. We did something called dye tracing with the river, which is where you put dye in the river, and it first turns the right color, and it's very obvious that the dye is there, but over time that doesn't out and you actually can't see it anymore. So you need something to actually be able to pick up and absorb that dye to figure out where that water comes from. So we put some of those little dye packs down here that absorb that dye into some of our pools. And we never actually ended up finding any dye down here in the water. So it wasn't the river water coming in here, some other source of water. So we think we're just intersecting maybe a little area where there's some groundwater that's flowing through here. Now during periods of time where we are seeing rain outside, especially heavy rain, we do see increased water flow here. So rainwater does get in here as well. So with all the water that likes to flow in here, that actually helps build and increase the larger formations that you see here. Where we keep it in the north wet area of the cave, we are getting larger formations than the usual happening in other parts of our cave. So these aren't any older than the other formations that we've been seeing down here. Now the water that does flow in here, it does first leave some of its rock behind these little stones and dripstones, but doesn't leave all of its rock behind these formations. So the water ends up collecting in the pool, like it has here. This water actually still has rock in it. So you can continue to get more formations then growing in pools of water. So we're going to be heading up the trail where we can take a closer look at a couple of other pools and take a look at a couple of formations of it.
Go ahead. No, then go ahead. Stop it.
So just up ahead here, as we go to cross the bridge, we'll take a very close look at a couple of pools of water and some formations. So close it's easy to touch things. So just a friendly reminder to make sure you only touch our handrails down here. So here through this area, looking around the pools, you might notice some little bumpy clusters here. These little bumpy clusters that we see are a formation called a plastrioid, and they actually like to grow down in a pool of water. So where we see them today, they're up above our pools. So these aren't actively growing anymore today. And it's telling us that our water used to actually be a little bit taller in these pools, or higher in these pools than what we see today as well. And we actually have another formation through here that actually tells us just how high our water's been. And that's this kind of oddly flat surface that you see in a couple areas through here. So this is a formation called shelf stone. And our shelf stone here forms at the surface of a pool of water. And it just follows your water surface. So slowly over time, you then end up with these nice flat shelf-like features like what we see here today. So our water used to be at least as high as the shelf stone for quite some time for so much shelf stone to be formed here. Now, through this area, this was actually dug out back when they found the cave. So this actually used to extend all the way across, and there were more expensive pools through here. We can see that here on the other side where there's more shelf stone and botryoids. Kind of unfortunate that they decided to dig through these pools here, and it destroyed quite a bit of what was here. But it did allow for people to be brought further back, including you guys here today. A lot of the material that was removed through this area as we head up the trail, a lot of this was actually just loose sediment that was deposited in here by the river that used to flow through here. But there was formations through here, more than just these pool formations that we see through here. There's actually a lot of flow stone that was deposited upon a lot of the sediment, and so you can kind of see the flow stones on the side here of what remains of them anyway. Correct. Yeah, so if you're noticing the ceilings down here through the cave, that might be one thing you're noticing is that they are incredibly flat. Almost looks like we've done something to make them this way, but these are natural. And the reason why we see such flat ceilings down here is because of the rock that's here. So there's actually more than just limestone here in our cave. There's also a rock called shale. And we have these layers of shale in between our layers of limestone. And shale is essentially mud turned to rock. So it's a very weak rock in comparison to our limestone in particular. And both our limestone and shale are in a family of rock that we call sedimentary rocks. So they get laid down and deposited in these nice flat horizontal layers. And here in this area, these layers have been relatively left alone. They haven't really been, tilted or bent and folded like we see in other areas. So think of mountainous regions where you have, these land masses colliding that can really kind of bend and folded rocks. Well, we haven't had that happen here, so these are still nice and flat. And so, with our cave growing here, as these passageways would get larger, you might have some instability, especially along those shale layers. So material would break and fall along shale layers. Oftentimes you're going to reveal just one layer of limestone, and since these are still nice flat layers, you're going to then end up with these nice flat ceilings like what we see here today. Kind of a unique feature here in Mystery Cave. A lot of other caves don't have the shale aspect to them, and so that means you don't necessarily see the flat ceilings in some other caves. So, good question. You guys have any other questions at all I can answer?
I do.
Yeah.
I read, of course, in the visitor center that at some point during the 1950s, 60s, that Mystery Cave was sort of side utilized as a bomb shelter. Mm-hmm. Exactly how deep does one need to be in order for it to be a bomb shelter?
You know, that's a good question. I really don't know. We're about 135 feet below the surface right here, and what they actually designated as the bomb shelter isn't too far beyond this point, down that direction. We won't actually get to head down there. We don't have any lights down there, and as you head down that way, it also starts getting a little bit smaller too. But yeah, they did kind of designate this as a bomb shelter. They put some food down here. They put some water down here. I really don't know how effective this would have been as a bomb shelter. You know, it could have sheltered you from a blast, at least to some extent. You'd think that would move the ground a little bit here, so, you know, you could then potentially have rock falling from the ceiling.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And then the other thought of it is, you know, if they're thinking, oh, well, maybe at least it would shield us from radiation or something like that. As you're underground, you're then not getting that radiation. Well, the water that comes into the ground here really doesn't see any filtration. So the radiation probably would have still been in the water that makes its way into the cave. So I really don't know how effective of a bomb shelter this would really be. So, yeah. Anyway, we have one last thing to see before we head out of our cave. You may have been hearing it just a little bit here, this trickling of water. There's actually one last pool to take a look at here, and we like to call this turquoise lake. So I'll get some lights on, and you guys can go take a closer look at the pool of water that is here.
Oh,
It's a very
cool.
beautiful pool. The turquoise lake here makes its name because of the beautiful blue turquoise coloration that the water has. That coloration actually comes from the rock that's in the water. Now looking around us at a rock, it's not blue or turquoise. So that isn't quite where the color comes from, but it actually has to do with how light is interacting with the dissolved calcite or limestone here in our water. So as light is passing through the dissolved rock here in the water, it actually likes to bend and reflect your light. And when it's doing that, it actually is changing the color of the light. So I like to think of it a little like shining light through a prism. If you shine light through a prism, light can actually be broken up and reflected and refracted into a whole rainbow of colors. So that's kind of what happens here, but we just get this one color. Now the other thing you might notice with our water is that it's quite clear. As I mentioned earlier though, there's very little to no filtration of the water that comes into the ground. So anything that can get in your water at the surface does end up in places like our cave, or just our groundwater here in this region, which is kind of unfortunate, because we do have a lot of agriculture that happens here in this area. So that's actually one of the largest sources of pollution that we see with our water here. Things like nitrogens, the nitrates and phosphates from our fertilizers and pesticides. I don't know if anyone is looking around in the visitor center. There's currently a person exhibit here from the Municipal Pollution Control Agency that goes around a lot of the libraries here in southeastern Minnesota, but we got a little tour with it too, so that might be something neat for you guys to check out as well, and learn more about the landscape we have here and what pollution factors we kind of see here too. Because it's more than just our agriculture too.
Do the bats come this far and often, like, do they stay more towards the entrances, or how deep do they come into it?
So they actually like to go pretty far into the cave, especially in this area. This is actually a pretty wet area of the cave, so they don't necessarily like being right in this area. One of the larger hibernaculums that is here, so that's the place they like to hibernate, is actually down towards Big Fork, and so that's beyond this point down that direction. Our wild caving tour actually goes all the way back to Big Fork, and then that's where you turn around. And then they really seem to enjoy the other part of our cave too, and we think that might be because it is a little drier over there, and we just aren't over there as frequently either. So when they're coming in to hibernate, we really aren't in that side of the cave a whole lot. Where we're still here when they're starting to come back for their hibernation. And then by the time they actually are hibernating, we're out of the cave for the winter actually. We stop doing tours by mid to late October.
How far do they migrate to?
Or in the cave.
From what distance to the outside, say,
I almost touched it leaning in to look at it.
And usually I do try to go through the things right. Sometimes there's only like a one light switch for that particular light, so I can just it and be on until the next person comes through, or someone notices it off at the visitor center. And they are confident no one's in, then they might turn it off. Yeah, with the lights, you know, in part energy, the other part, algae growth, we actually need great algae growth for our room. And it's not another of the factors that you see, but having a light on is also pretty oftentimes. So they can never it's really hot. Now we have a lot of LED.
There's no pass to stay with that. I'm not getting the people, I'm just getting the thing.
Just about back to the entrance here. You remember when we came in there, you got all the dripping water here. You want to avoid, I always move over to the right now, just so now there's just one handrail in. So we do lantern and geology tours through our other entrance, and those are predominantly storm weekends. Unless we have steps that we're requesting, we do a lantern or geology tour for them. Usually those are like school groups that are doing that sort of thing, or a summer group, like we get some like YMCA kids groups in. So. Heading up there. Yeah, so next week we'll actually be doing, there'll be some work happening on this side of the state, so we're actually gonna be exclusively doing tours over all the other entrances. coming into the passageway here, looking around, some of you might be noticing some holes here in the ceiling. They're what are pretty noticeable here. The large ones are really what catch your eye, but looking around, you might notice smaller ones as well, like these two here. These holes in our ceiling, small or large, are what we like to call solutional domes. And these have formed in our ceiling, not from the rainwater that's coming in today, because that is just creating our formations like our flow stones and drip stones. So it was actually our river water that made these holes. And since they're in our ceiling, they're telling us that our water that used to flow through here would actually completely fill our passageways into the ceiling with water. So when you have that much water in a space, it's really going to be looking for anywhere it can go. So it gets pushed into any little crack and hole here in the rock, and it's going to dissolve those cracks away just like the rest of the cave. So you oftentimes are going to be getting smaller solutional domes over time, like these two here. Sometimes these can grow and get even larger, and maybe even turn into bigger solutional domes like this one. Part of the reason why we may be seeing such a large, more circular solutional dome here is actually because we have lots of intersecting cracks. So there's one crack that is extending this direction, there's another one that comes in from over here, and another one from over here, and maybe another one from here too. So lots of little cracks that are all intersecting in a small space will be helping create our larger solutional dome here. Now we also have lots of cracks in the walls down here. So we can also be having the same thing happen with the cracks in our walls, where we're getting these holes. Those are what we like to call pockets. So this is a pocket here, and then there's another one down here as well. These pockets over time, these actually might be adding on to a passageway, making the passageway taller. Like this case, if these would have continued to dissolve, I bet these would have helped to make a taller passageway through here. In other cases, these solutional or these pockets, as they're getting larger, they might turn into holding these passageways. It just kind of depends on where they're growing and forming to start with. Another neat thing that we see on the ceiling here in this area is actually a fossil. So a neat thing about limestone, not only can we get caves in it, but there's oftentimes fossils in it as well. And we have a fossil kind of up here over in this area. If you're over by me, I know it's a little more difficult to see, but this is a fossil of something called a cephalopod. And this is this kind of hard cone-shaped shell. That's what we're seeing as our cephalopod. We actually have cephalopods that live today, but no longer have these hard cone-shaped shells like this. And there's things like squid and octopus. And if you think about it a little bit, and think about where squid and octopus live, it's telling us that we've actually had a totally different environment here, because our squid and octopus are living in oceans today.
Yeah.
We also assume these ones lived in oceans. So it's telling us that we've actually had an ocean here at one point in time, which can be hard to imagine because we are nowhere near an ocean today. But over Earth's history, our land moves and shifts around, and our oceans like to go up and down, our sea levels change. And so over long periods of time here on Earth, we get these different environments and things look very different. So about 450 million years ago, during a time period called the Ordovician, that's actually when we had the shallow tropical sea here. At that point in time, Minnesota was located a lot closer to the equator, and we had higher sea levels. There was less ice on Earth, so more water in our ocean, and higher sea levels. So we had the shallow tropical sea that covered this part of Minnesota. So pretty neat to imagine. This is one of the larger fossils that we see in our cave, but there are many other fossils here as well. Most of what is here, though, is maybe about the size of your thumbnail and smaller. So quite small. Much more difficult to find and spot and point out to everyone.
Are there any theories of what made all the water not go through here anymore?
Are you talking about the river water flowing at this level? So part of what we think happened was about 10,000 years ago and a little bit earlier than that. We were kind of at the end of the ice age at that point in time. So that was when the glaciers were melting, and so we had actually a lot of meltwater passing through this area, and so that probably helped really fill up these passageways. And then our rivers, they kind of shrink back down after all that water's gone, there might be still water flowing. And so we just didn't have maybe quite as much water moving through here. The other thing is, you're having more passageways develop. It's a bigger space then for water to fill, and maybe there just isn't enough water to fill everything. And so when passageways are starting to develop further down, your water's going to kind of start moving or migrating further down, and this becomes air-filled then. So, yeah, good questions. Well, we're going to be continuing up the trail here. You see our ancient sea creatures here in our rock. There are actually things that we're doing here today. So as we head up the trail, certain people might actually live in our cave today. And also keep an eye out for cave bacon, because there's a good example of cave bacon up ahead. And then again, just make sure you watch your head a little taller, so the ceilings do get a little closer.
Can't tell if it creeps me out looking down or if I like it. Because part of me likes it, part of me is going, stop looking.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that they would like to know, but it's so hard to track a bat. So they can do what's called banding with bats, which is kind of like what you do with birds, where you put this little kind of piece of metal and you put it on their wing, and it has like a number on it. So like if you find that bat again with that little number, you can identify them and figure out where they are, and maybe where they've been. But there's like a radio transmitter with that actually tell you exactly where they've gone. And you can put like a little radio transmitter on, but it only stays on for a couple of days and then it will fall off. And our technology that we have with those particular radio transmitters that they use, you can only tell from a certain distance away, like if they're there. So technology has been quite advanced a lot in that area as much as you would like it to. But things are changing, so hopefully here in the future we might have a little bit better technology to figure that out. But we've wondered about that a little bit here. We do summer bat counts over at historic Forestville, and so we count bats as they come out of the buildings over there. And we have wondered if any of those bats happen to use our cave here to hide away their anchor. We don't necessarily think that's the case. There's probably some other areas a lot closer to them there than what here. But they can certainly make the trip over here pretty easy. So